Hey everyone, I am here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. My name is Mandy Smith. I'm the Director of Education. We have a real treat for you all here today. We are going to be talking to the legendary Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. Of course, during her stint with the Mamas and the Papas, they recorded 5 albums. They had 6 top 10 Billboard hits, sold over 40 million records, and they closed out the legendary Monterey Pop Festival. Then, of course, for all of this, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And really, they just helped define folk rock, both the musical style and the counterculture movement that was really starting alongside of it. So, welcome, Michelle Phillips.
Thank you, Mandy.
How are you doing today?
Uh, so far so good. You know, it's nice and quiet in the neighborhood.
That is good. Quiet is always a good thing.
Yeah, but I'm
Well,
on
thank you.
medication, so
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sitting down with us. And I'm just super excited to talk to you about your music career and, of course, your acting career as well, because you didn't just stop with one career. You had to have two, which is totally amazing.
yeah. Well, my acting career actually lasted a lot longer. I mean,
Yeah.
the Mamas and Papas were only together for 2.5 years,
Yeah. It was a really a
almost
whirlwind.
3. Huh?
It was just a whirlwind for the amount of
Yeah,
stuff that you guys were able to accomplish.
yeah.
Hmm.
We did a lot. It was just writing, rehearsing, recording, and touring, and then back to the same grind, you know.
Just
But
constant.
it was uh, a great lesson for me. Uh, I really did not feel very secure singing,
Hmm.
and John just said, "Oh, well, you just have to learn how to sing." So actually, I started re- studying with Judy Davis in San Francisco,
Right.
and then I studied with Bert Knapp in New York. And
Hmm.
it's really true. If you practice something, you actually do. You know, if you have some kind of inclination for it, you actually
Hmm.
do learn how to sing well. And then when I was paired off with Cass, then I really grew musically because uh, she gave me a lot of confidence.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And your
she'd
voices
say,
melded
"Okay,
together
let's
so
go."
well.
What?
And your voices melded together so well. They complemented one another.
Well, she had to learn how to sing with me too,
Hmm.
because John wanted us to blend. That was the whole thing about our sound, was that the girls blended together
Hmm.
and the boys blended together, and the four of us blended together.
Hmm.
And that's hard to do, especially when you were like Cass, you were a soloist,
Hmm.
and she was used to you know blasting out every song that she sang.
Yeah.
And John would say, "No, Cass, you've got to sing with Michelle." And it was hard for her. She had to
Hmm.
train herself to blend with another woman. But
And of
we did it.
course, rewinding to the beginning, this wasn't your first. Singing wasn't your first musical instrument, right? You learned to play a few instruments when you were a kid, correct?
Well, I was the number one cello in my junior high school orchestra,
Hmm.
and I played guitar. Once I got a guitar, I learned how to play a little bit of guitar. I I already knew how to play a little piano,
Hmm.
so I didn't play anything very well, but I played a lot of different instruments, and that just it showed that I really did have a great love for music.
Hmm.
And I didn't really take these things into consideration when I started singing with John and Denny and Cass. I just felt that I really wasn't prepared for
Mhm.
this massive um, uh, success that we had. But then I got used to that too.
And it was so instant too.
Yeah.
It's not like you know, did okay with your first album and then did better and better. It
No,
was
no, no.
really
It was the first
all at
album
once.
right out of the chute,
Mhm.
and I remember when we would hear uh, parts played back, we'd hear like a part of a song that we had just sung, and we just stand there in amazement at how good we sounded. And um, John was really a great arranger. That's where he
Mhm.
really shined more than. I mean, he wasn't a great singer either, but he blended with Denny really well, and he knew how to get what he wanted out of the the three of us.
Mhm.
So
Uh, and so back going back to your childhood, you learned to play a few instruments, but also you moved around a little. You lived in Mexico City, you lived in Buffalo, New York. You spent a good deal of time in Southern California. Tell us a little bit about what kind of music was in your household when you were growing up. What were you and your dad and your sister listening to?
classical music,
Mm.
that's we were not allowed to change the dial on the radio. We didn't have a television.
Hmm.
We in my whole life as a child and an adolescent, we never had a TV in our house.
Mm.
So uh, I heard a lot of classical music, and that's what I listen to today.
Hmm.
Back to your roots, I guess.
Yeah. Any particular composers that stick out to you either now or then?
N- n- uh, you know, I listen to everybody. I listen to Mendelssohn, and I listen
Mm.
to Brahms, and I listen to uh, Mozart and Beethoven, and
Mhm.
I I can't think of. Well, I wasn't crazy about Aaron Copland. I didn't feel he was classical enough.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
He was more of a pop, you, you know. But I've put that prejudice away now too.
Nice, nice. Uh, then, of course, you meet a good friend of yours, Tamar Hodel, as you were growing up. And she's really the one who introduces you to folk music.
Right.
What were your first impressions of folk music, growing up in mainly a classical music kind of household?
Well, when folk music hit, um, when when folk music was what you listened to, that's what
Mhm.
I was hearing on the radio too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was hearing the Kingston Trio. That was,
Mm.
when it was first introduced, that's who we were listening to. We were listening to kind of very commercialized folk.
Mhm.
But as I, uh, as when I became friends with Tamar, she introduced me to Bessie Smith and
Mhm.
Robeson and to Paul Robeson, and we would go to the Ash Grove, which was a club here in LA, and listen to
Mhm.
Odetta,
Mhm.
and uh, um, just and a lot of blues singers. You
Mhm.
know, I know you know nothing about the Ash Grove, but it was really a very popular club,
Mhm.
and the Troubadour, uh,
Mhm.
which is a club on Santa Monica, also, you know, played a lot of folk music, and everybody that I knew that went into rock or into top 40 music like John Sebastian and the Byrds. The Byrds were just a little group here in LA that used to open for groups at the Troubadour. And
Mhm.
I remember very clearly that when we were in the Virgin Islands, putting kind of a sound together, I kept saying, let's go back to Los Angeles, please. I don't want to go back to winter in New York. And John said, well, this is where the music is. But, we had to live in New York because that's where the music was at the time. But I remember we were in the bar one morning, and I remember this song coming on the radio, and we were all listening to it, and John said, is that the Birds? Because we knew their sound.
Yeah.
And Cass said, yeah, that's the Birds. Shit, we got to get out of here. If the Birds can have a hit, anybody can have a hit. That's what we thought about that, but everyone was doing it in Los Angeles now, to my, I was so happy to be able to come home.
Mm-hmm. That whole folk revival movement just moves from coast to coast, from New York to LA and to
LA. I mean,
Canyon.
even Peter, Paul, and Mary had to drag their little asses out to Los Angeles, because this is where it was really happening. And the Birds and the Lovin' Spoonful and the Mamas and the Papas and all these people were now singing, commercial music. And we all lived in Laurel Canyon because that was the cheapest place you could live. And we were kind of we'd already known each other in the folk era, so that's why it kind of became kind of like a commune. I hate the way Laurel Canyon has been glorified beyond reason. It was just a play. It was already an actor's, actors, even in the 20s. And before that, you lived there because that was a cheap place to live. And so there were a lot of artists there. So, so then we came to Laurel Canyon.
And you mentioned the Virgin Islands really briefly, but that's where the Mamas and the Papas really solidify your sound, right? Talk about that process of finding the sound and sort of singing out into the ocean and how that came about.
Well, you want to really know how it came about?
I really do.
Okay, we all took acid for the first time, one night. And way into this acid trip, we were playing this game of, getting out of New York and going to, someplace else and someplace, taking a sabbatical. I don't know what we were taking a sabbatical from, but
yeah.
So they put something over my eyes and they twirled me around, and we had this great big map of the world on a wall, and I think I was handed a dart, and they said, wherever Michelle hits, that's where we're going to go. So they twirled me around and they said, okay, throw the dart. And I threw the dart and it ended up in the middle of the Atlantic. So Jenny took the dart and he kind of said, and we swim over here, over to the Virgin Islands. So we left for the Virgin Islands, and Cass was there that night too. That's when I really got to know Cass for the first time, was on acid, which was really spectacular, really fun.
What a beginning to a friendship.
Yeah, it really truly was. but she said, "Well, I can't go to the Virgin Islands. I have to do." She had to do the Danny Kaye show.
Hmm.
So she says, "But I hope to get down there." And one day, we, we put up tents on the beach in St.
Hmm.
John, and it was a deserted beach. And we were there off season. We started in January, and we were there January, February, March, April, May, and we came back in June. That's after Cass did come down, and we started singing together, and we started to sing together in earnest and work out some songs that we
Hmm.
knew. We John and I had already written California Dreamin' about 2 years before that, but we never did anything with it.
Another example of how you did not really like living in New York.
Yeah. Well, that's of course that's was the inspiration for that song.
Hmm.
And people always tell me, even last night I was out for dinner and a guy came up to me and he said, "You're the reason I live in California." He said, "Because I used to live in Boston and I heard California Dreamin' for the first time and I packed up my car and left, and I've never left California."
Wow, that's wild. How does
Yeah.
it feel to have written a song that has that kind of impact on people?
Yeah. I mean, um, thousands and thousands of people came out to California just because of
Yeah.
that song.
Hmm.
Uh, they used to say they used to have a statistic that when the Super Bowl played, uh, is the Super Bowl always played in California?
I think it moves around,
Oh,
but
okay. Well,
I
they said that
the
when
football fan in the back is shaking her head. It moves around.
they when they would play in California, that there would be a mass uh,
Mm,
uh, of people who would
just descend.
come to California and stay.
Mm,
Um, they loved, they were freezing in Detroit, and we were all wearing T-shirts,
hmm.
and you could see the sunshine and people having a great time in the sun.
Yeah.
And thousands of people have come up to me and said, "I just remember that so well. What an influence that was on me coming here."
And there is just something different about the California weather. I actually lived in Long Beach for a few years,
City
about
of my
10 years
birth.
ago. I know, I know. Isn't that so cool? When I read that, I was like, oh, I used to live there. And there's just something different about just living in that sort of perfect weather. My skin was better, my health felt better. You just kind of feel a little bit more vibrant when you just kind of live in that weather and that atmosphere.
Well, I think I heard once that that's why Los Angeles became the center of the film
Mhm.
industry,
Hmm.
was because you had desert, mountains, oceans,
Yeah,
uh,
all the sex you would
everything
ever need.
available within a 2-hour drive,
Hmm.
and and it was always sunny, so
Yeah.
they didn't have to worry about rain, and we certainly don't have to worry about it now because we're way past that.
Hmm.
But uh, yeah, that's why so many people want to live in California. They want the weather.
Hmm.
They want their kids to be able to play outside and ride their bikes and
Yeah.
not spend 3 or 4 months in the dead of winter.
Hmm.
And I certainly can't blame them.
Yeah. Me neither. Me neither. I love Cleveland, but there are things I miss about California for sure.
Yeah.
And so at this point, the Mamas and the Papas are formed. You guys are back out in California. You hit the studio, and really the first four records have a lot of the same people on them. You know, you've got Larry Knechtel on the keys. You've got Joe Osborne on the bass. You've got Hal Blaine, a Rock and
And
Roll Hall
playing
of
on
Fame
drums. Yeah, they
inductee
were
on
our
the drums.
constant. They were our recording group. They wouldn't go on the road with us. You know, they
Yeah,
all made
right.
tons of money. They were studio musicians,
Mhm. And
and
Lou Adler producing you, of
and
course.
you know, we met Lou Adler through Barry McGuire, who
Mm-hmm.
used to be in the New Christy Minstrels. But
Right.
everybody probably at one point was in the New Christy Minstrels. Um, and he said, you know, when we first came out here, we didn't really know anybody but Barry. So we went
Mhm.
to crash in his apartment. And when the door opened, uh, he just said, "Welcome." And we said, "Can we stay with you for a few days?" And he said, "Sure." So uh, after he heard us sing,
Mhm.
he said, "Do you have anybody lined up that you're going to go see?" And we said, "Well, yeah, we're going to go see Nick Benet at Capitol." He said, "I think you ought to go see Lou Adler, my producer. He's
Mhm.
really, really good. He and a couple of guys own Dunhill Records, and it's great small label,
Mhm.
but you're going to like Lou." And we all fell in love with Lou the minute we met him,
Mhm.
and he with us. So the next day, he said, you know, he listened to basically almost the first album when we were singing for him, and he would go, "Mm-hmm. Got anything else? Mm-hmm. Got anything else?"
You must have felt like he probably did not like it.
No, no. You know, he just held his cards very close to the vest, and he said, "Well, why don't you guys come over here tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and we'll talk about this some more." I said, "Okay." So the next day we went back, and there were contracts all over the floor for us to sign. He wanted to sign us right away before anybody else got to us.
Yeah,
And
smart.
he was in the middle of Barry McGuire's second album, and he said, "Why don't you sing some backgrounds for Barry's album, and that'll keep you in some money until we get around to recording." So uh, it's really funny to hear him because he sang California Dreamin',
Mhm.
and we were going to give it to him as a present, but after we recorded it, um, how'd that work? I don't remember exactly how that worked. I know that he recorded it first,
Mhm.
and then Lou took me and John out to the hallway, and he said, "We're not going to give this to Barry." He says, "This is too good. This is going to be your first single."
Yeah.
So Barry was quite understanding, and we used the same track as and the same backgrounds,
Mhm.
only amplified them a little bit more. So when you hear Barry's version of California Dreamin', it's exactly the Mamas and Papas version.
It
Only
is.
in
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah, it's trippy to hear that difference, but
Yeah.
also it's so similar. It's the same
And then
texture, same background.
he was playing harmonica, and we played the flute during the instrumental.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, but otherwise, it's the same track, the same musicians. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny.
What was the studio process like between Lou and the three musicians and the four singers? How did the magic happen in the studio?
Well, we'd go out to the studio. We'd have Hal and Joe and um,
Larry.
Larry
Mhm.
all there, and we'd go in and we'd sing a song for them. and then we'd sing it again, and they'd start to kind of play a little bit, and and Hal would be he'd kind of get a beat to it, and
Yeah.
it just came together organically,
Hmm.
and uh, and Lou would say, "Yeah, Larry, I love that. I love the piano there. Do that." And you know, I love that bass line, Joe. And Lou had was very involved in the sound.
Hmm.
You know, even when we had problems, sometimes we just couldn't figure out what a song was supposed to sound like, and we would start to sing it, but it just wasn't sounding right. And Lou would come out and say, "John, why don't you put the instrumental right after the first verse, then come back and do the second verse, and then we'll go out on the third. What do you think?" And we'd do it, and it would sound great. So that's why we used to call him the fifth mama,
Yeah. Yeah.
because he did contribute a lot.
Hmm. He would help you just kind of rearrange the songs and
Yeah, he would rearrange
figure
things
out the right formula.
that weren't working, and had uh, he had worked with uh, Johnny Rivers. Johnny
Hmm.
he was the one who recorded Johnny Rivers, and beautifully,
Hmm.
and he worked with Sam Cooke,
Yeah.
and um, that song, "What a Wonderful World It Would Be."
Yeah.
Don't
Absolutely.
know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about the French I took. Da, 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 da. Anyhow, Lou is a writer on that song.
Hmm. It's
So
a classic song.
he had a great, great musical ear.
Hmm. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And he just went on. He just kept doing more and more amazing things throughout
Oh,
his career.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Uh, he did Cheech and Chong,
Yep.
discovered Cheech and Chong.
Which weren't you? Didn't you sing background on one of those Cheech and
Somebody
Chong
else told
records?
me that. I don't remember doing it, but I think I
Yeah.
did. Um, yeah, and then he did, of course, Carole King. He did
Hmm.
Tapestry, and uh, he owns the something something horror horror show, Rocky Horror Show.
Rocky Horror Picture Show. Hmm.
Yeah, he owns
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's always playing somewhere in any
Always.
24-hour period. It's always playing somewhere in the world.
Hmm. Here in Cleveland, we have a midnight show every month.
Lou is a
Hmm.
very rich man now.
Well, good for him.
Ah, you gotta give it to him.
Yeah.
He 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 heard it, and he knew whether it was a commercial
Hmm.
venture or not.
Yeah. And he really
Talent.
identified that with your first record, if you can believe your eyes and ears. And I think a lot of people at the time couldn't believe their eyes and ears because what you were doing was really, it was something new, the way that you were combining folk music and rock music, but also, sort
And
of
we
in some
play
ways
a
help.
jazzy number every now
Yep.
and then. And we used to cover a lot of songs. We loved
Hmm.
to cover um, uh,
The Beatles, the Shirelles, so
yeah,
many people.
right. The Beatles, the Shirelles, Rodgers and Hart.
Hmm.
Uh, well, we took the Rodgers and Hart from a Rodgers and Hart special that we did for ABC.
Hmm.
I think it was ABC, and that was Quincy Jones was conducting the orchestra. Uh, the Supremes were there, the Mamas and the Papas, and but we were all singing Rodgers and Hart.
Hmm.
So we took our 3 Rodgers and Hart tunes and put them on albums because we were
Mhm.
always short of material.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, why don't we use that Rodgers and Hart song? Yeah. And it would already be sung and done, and maybe we'd put a new lead on it or something.
Hmm.
But we sang a lot of different types of songs. Even Dream a Little Dream of Me
Right.
was written in the 30s.
Hmm.
And and Fabian Andres, who was one of 3 writers on Dream a Little Dream,
Hmm.
was who my father and my sister and I went to stay with when we first got to Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
So he was a very good friend of ours. And I remember my father told me one day that Fabian had died.
Mm.
And I was very saddened by that. And we had a rehearsal that day. And I told John that our friend Fabian had died. And he said, "Didn't he write Dream a Little Dream of Me?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Cass, come here." And we started to work up Dream a Little Dream.
Hmm. And whenever you guys did a cover, you always made it your own. It always just sounds
Yeah,
like it was always supposed to be a Mamas and the Papas song.
right. That's true. We never, you know, we always made it our own. It
Hmm.
sounded like John had written those
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it was really great fun to work with John and Cass and Denny. They were just Denny was the greatest tenor. I mean, he was the
Yeah.
least known. He was the least appreciated in,
Mm.
um, but he was very shy of the press,
Mm.
but he sang practically all uh, the
The-
leads.
yeah. The male leads for sure.
He sang the lead on California Dreamin', and
Hmm.
he sang the lead on Monday Monday, and he sang the lead on I Saw Her Again,
Hmm.
and uh, he had such a beautiful tenor voice.
Hmm. So then, around the time of the second album, things get a little rocky, and you end up, right? The understatement. You end
Yeah.
up getting kicked out of the band. Uh, how did you deal with that?
Well, we didn't have any material
Hmm.
because most of our material was based on our experiences together.
Right.
Um, I Saw Her Again was a song written by John and Denny about the affair with Denny that I
Hmm.
had.
Yeah.
Um, and California Dreamin' was written about how I felt about living in New York
Yeah.
and going back to California. And Monday Monday was just one of those songs that, John always around with his guitar strapped to himself, and he'd say, "I want to write a song with universal appeal." And
Well,
Cass and I
that
were
is one.
Cass and I were playing gin, and and we started to laugh at him. We said, "That's a great idea, John. You go ahead and write that song. You get out there, write that song." So he disappears for about a half hour, and he comes back and he says, listen to this. Monday, Monday. Can't trust that day. Monday, Monday. Sometimes it just turns out that way. And Cass and I burst into laughter. And we said, "That is the most pretentious lyric I have ever heard. That's awful."
Oh man.
And Cass said, "She's right. That's an awful lyric, John." And Denny said, "Mm." John, you can do better than that. So he finishes writing it, and we go into the studio, and he plays it for Lou. And Lou said, I love that.
Uh-huh.
I love that. I said, Lou, don't encourage this. And he said, Michelle, that's going to be your next single. I said, oh, great. Well, that'll be the end of what was a very promising career for all
Uh,
of us. And he
but
said,
he was
Michelle,
right. It hit
he
number
said,
one.
he said, Michelle, why don't you do the singing and I'll do the releasing, okay? So we sang the song and we released it about 2 days later.
Mhm.
It shot to number one.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all of us are saying, yeah, well, I think I told John that he should write a song with universal appeal. And Cass was saying, it's so lush, so beautiful.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we were so hypocritical about it.
And it's not just a number one for you. It is the first number one record by a mixed gender group ever.
Yeah, yeah, I guess
That's
you're right. I think I heard that before.
mhm.
Um, yeah, there were mainly guy groups. There were
Mhm.
some groups with women in them, like Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Mhm.
And later on, there was like Jefferson Airplane.
Mhm. And some women solo artists, Joan Baez, Odetta, and the and Full Revival
Yeah,
scene.
yeah, but they were solo artists.
Yep.
Uh, our sound depended on the four of us. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I remember John would not let me wear any makeup. And he wouldn't let me or Cass wear any makeup on stage. And he wouldn't let us, I couldn't put my hair up.
Mhm.
And I said, why can't I wear makeup? And he said, because if you wear mascara, she's going to want to put on lashes. If you put your hair up, she's going to wear a fall. We are not the Shirelles. No, he said, we are not the Supremes. I tried to go on stage once in high heels, and he said, take them off. He was very bossy.
Yeah, it
But
sounds
he
like
was
it.
right. We did have an image of being kind
Mhm.
of like wacky, crazy hippies
Yeah.
until we got rich, and then we were rich hippies. You
Well, and
know,
you played such a role in sort of crafting the image of like the California woman with the long flowy clothes and the straight blonde hair. I mean, everyone was wearing their hair like that and dressing like that. But I feel like you really did a great job of popularizing that what is now a classic look.
I know. You know how on some in some pictures I'm kind of dark haired, and then I have
Yeah.
blonde. Do you know that women now are actually bleaching the bottom of their hair
Hmm.
to get that look? And mine was just growing out. I used to
Yeah.
work for Clairol. I mean,
Oh.
I used to do print for Clairol,
Hmm.
and they always kept me as a real blonde.
Hmm.
But when I wasn't modeling anymore, I wasn't coloring my hair. I just let it grow out and grow
Yeah.
out. So this was all still blonde.
Yeah.
And now they're going to their hairdressers and getting that look.
I want that. That's wild. Well, we've got to talk about Monterey Pop because it was such a seminal moment in rock history. I mean, I go to music festivals all the time, and it's clear that even music festivals today are modeled after the model that was set up at Monterey Pop. And I know John Phillips, was one of the main organizers. What was the behind the scenes like? How did that even come about?
Well, The whole idea started with our pot dealer. He came over one day and he said, you know, uh, Benny Shapiro and I uh, are going to have like a 2-day festival in Monterey. We've already got the Monterey Fairgrounds uh, locked down
Hmm.
for those 2 days. And that was Friday and Saturday. And, but they didn't have anybody booked. And they didn't know how they were going to actually make money on it.
Hmm.
So what John and Lou did was buy them out. And they
Okay.
bought another day. They bought Sunday at the fairgrounds. So we had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we started uh, making it like a very hip idea to be at this festival. And
Yeah.
we talked it up a lot. And what John and Lou did was brilliant. They made a board of directors that we could put on our stationery. The board of directors included Paul McCartney and um, um, uh, Mick Jagger and uh, Lou Adler and John
Hmm.
Phillips and Paul Simon and just there were like
Big
12
names.
board of directors, and so it looked great on paper,
Yeah.
you know. So that was very helpful in getting people to perform for free. It was unheard of. Nobody had ever performed for free.
Yeah.
And we would say, well, it's for a charity. It's what's the charity? And John and Lou would scramble to, well, we're going to open music schools in
Hmm.
Harlem, and we're going to help the free clinic, and we're going to, they were coming up with whatever they could think of, and and all of a sudden it became like very hip. Word got out that Ravi Shankar was going to be there, and Otis Redding was going to be there, and Simon and Garfunkel were going to be there, the Mums and the Papas, and it went on and on. And we got everybody to do it for free. But it was the classiest of class events. We
Hmm.
flew everybody in on Lear jets, and uh, we we put them up at all the great hotels in Monterey and Carmel,
Hmm.
um, and so all and we got ABC. Oh, we also, well, nobody knew who Jimi Hendrix was at that
Yeah.
time,
Not at the
and
time.
nobody knew who Janis Joplin was either.
Hmm.
They were going to be there. Uh, so we got ABC to agree to for Penny Baker, who was a documentarian,
Hmm.
uh, one of the best,
Yeah.
to shoot it, and then we introduced Jimi Hendrix to the show, and people were just agape.
It's one of the best
And
live performances ever.
I mean, he was like, you know his guitar,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
he put it on the floor of the stage, and he put a bottle of lighter fluid between his legs, and he uh, put the lighter fluid. He
Hmm.
got the lighter fluid all over the guitar, and then he set it on fire. Now, I thought that that was awful. You know, we just cherished our instrument.
Yeah.
And but that was kind of the beginning of rock and roll theater.
Hmm.
You know, Janis Joplin uh, was turned out to be one of the biggest hits of of the festival. And Otis Redding, I chose Otis Redding. We were all allowed to choose one group that we wanted,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
I suggested Otis Redding.
Well, good job, because that performance,
That performance was
oh,
out of this world.
so much energy.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And another group that I loved
Hmm.
really a lot was Canned Heat.
Hmm.
And I had never really heard Canned Heat before, and they
Yeah.
had such energy. They were great. And
Hmm.
we got the airplane to come,
Jefferson Airplane. Hmm.
the Jefferson Airplane, and and Grace Slick was just so sexy and
Hmm.
so charismatic.
Charismatic.
Yeah. And so when it was all over and we were looking at the footage, it was just too good to give to ABC.
Hmm.
So we put together a little reel for them. We emphasized a lot of Otis Redding, especially him screwing his guitar and lighting it on fire.
Hmm.
Uh, we had we made it as raunchy as we possibly could, and we sent it to ABC, and
So they wouldn't want it.
they came back and they said, "This is a family network. We can't play that on our network." We said,
Oh,
"Oh, gee, really? Oh," they said, "You can have it. Do whatever you want with it."
smart.
Uh, Today, the Monterey Pop Festival still generates thousands and thousands of dollars a year
Hmm.
from sales of the Monterey Pop Festival.
Yeah.
I mean, Lou has shepherded that project for 50 years. It's
Wow.
always made tons of money. It's it's been shown on television over and over and over again. And it's just it's breathtaking really to watch it.
Hmm.
There's so much talent in that performance.
Yeah. And the mamas and the papas close out the whole thing
Right.
to just a really happy crowd. I mean, it just seems like everyone just loved
Yeah, but
your.
the Who had gone on before us,
Hmm.
and they had broken all the um, instruments. They'd banged
Right.
in their drum. They had, they awful. It was awful. And my mic, I think what you hear of me is what's going through Cass's mic because
Oh.
my mic was just ruined,
Hmm.
and I don't think you could even hear me singing on it at all. I think it's just John Cass and Denny.
Hmm.
But when Otis Redding came out, he was not used to performing in front of an all white audience. I
Hmm.
mean, I had seen him at the Apollo,
Hmm.
and I was the only white girl in the whole audience. But I fell in love with him when I saw him perform. And when he came out to the Monterey Pop Festival, he was facing a, a hippie, um, white. I mean,
Hmm.
there were black people there, but it was mainly a white
Mostly
audience.
white. Hmm.
And he came out, and the first thing he said was, "So, this is the love crowd." And it changed the whole trajectory of his career. I mean, all of a sudden he was playing great big white venues,
Yeah.
and then of course he died very soon after that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Tragic. Well,
tragic.
let's fast forward a little bit. I do want to touch on your acting career. So in the late '60s, it's really a time of transition for you. You become a mom. The mamas and the papas dissolve. Um, what made you get into acting, and how did you make that career change?
I just wanted to act. I
Mhm.
I I knew that it would be a lot of fun, and I was uh, I was going with Jack Nicholson, and
Mhm.
he said, if you want to act, take some acting classes. Go,
Just like your singing classes.
yeah, exactly. Go learn how to do a monologue. Go learn how to, concentrate in front of a camera. Go go learn how to uh, cry. you, you know, um, and he was right. I studied with a lot of different acting coaches in Los Angeles, and the first job that I ever got was Dillinger,
Right.
which was a feature film starring Warren Oates, Ben Johnson, Cloris Leachman, and Richard Dreyfuss. It was a really cool cast, and John
Yeah.
Milius. It was John Milius's directorial debut,
Mhm.
and we were in Oklahoma for more than a month doing the whole shoot on location. And I was nominated for a Golden Globe
Mhm.
for my first acting job. But you know what? I couldn't find a job after that. No one really thought that a singer should be an actress.
Hmm.
And to be fair, that's the way singers feel about actors who want to be singers.
It goes
Um,
both ways.
yeah, it does. Um, but finally, our producer of Dillinger called Aaron Spelling,
Mhm.
and he said, this girl, Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, she did a great job for me on Dillinger. He said, please put her in something. He said, well, can she work on Monday? I'm starting a movie of the week, and I don't have my lead actress for it.
Hmm.
He said, yes. So I was on the set with Melvin Douglas and um, a really great cast of people, and uh, I worked with uh, besides a lot of other producers and a lot of other directors. I worked for Aaron Spelling for 25 years. I
Yeah,
did
you did a
every
lot of
show.
projects.
I did every show that he ever had on television. I did 90210 for
Mhm.
5 years. I did um, I did Seventh Heaven,
Mhm.
uh, and I did 7 Fantasy Islands and 4 Love Boats. But he was great. But in the meantime, I did Valentino with Ken Russell,
Mhm.
who was our director, and so I went to Europe, and Audrey Hepburn, Omar Sharif, James Mason. Um, it was a great cast,
Mhm.
and I just had a great time. It was one of the great big movies that Hollywood ever the end of the great big budget movies.
Mhm.
God, we were treated like kings and queens, and they paid well, you know. Um, so I picked up China and Rosa Garcia, her nanny, and we flew to England. We got a beautiful townhouse in England, in London, where we stayed for 6 months. It took us 6 months to do Valentino. Um, and Nureyev, who played Valentino, was about the most miscast person you could imagine, you know, and he wasn't very happy. doing the movie because it was, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work. I'm not saying that, what he wanted to do was be on a ballet stage.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, but Ken thought that that dynamic part of him would transfer into film,
Mm.
but it didn't.
Mm.
And he didn't speak English very well. You can hardly understand what he's saying. But, you know, that was a real interesting experience for me.
Yeah.
And and but I never really did a lot of movies. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
did a movie with Richard Dreyfuss called Let It Ride,
Mm-hmm.
which was
But you did a lot more TV. Like what I remember you from is my mom loved Knots Landing. So
I
I
did
really remember.
too.
Yeah, I thought it was wild to play, this like evil villain. How did that feel? Was that like an outlet for you in some way?
Well, my agent called me one day, and I was doing uh, 10 episodes of Hotel. Remember Hotel with
Mm-hmm.
uh, um, anyhow, and uh, he said, David, uh, David, whatever our producer's name was. Sorry, David. David Jacobs. David Jacobs
Jacobs,
wants to meet with you tomorrow for lunch. And I said, what for? And he says, I don't know. Just go have lunch with him at the Ivy on the Shore, 1 o'clock. So I went to meet him, and he said, I said, I don't even know why I'm here. He said, oh, well, we wrote a part for you in Knots Landing. Now, I knew about the series, but I'd never seen it. And I told
right?
him that. I said, I've never even seen Knots Landing. He said, well, we'll send you uh, last week's show and this week's show, or the last two shows.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can watch it tonight because it's Thursday. And you can call me on Friday and let me know if you have any interest in it. By the time I'd seen 3 episodes of it, I called him and I said, I want to do this really badly. He said, great. Well, you start as soon as you finish with Hotel. And I did 6 seasons of the show. And
Wow.
I loved my character, Ann Matheson. And
Yeah.
she was such a horrible mother.
Yeah.
She Nick Sheridan's mother, of course. And it was just the most fun I've ever had.
I bet.
It was. And I won the Best Villainess Award for
Mm-hmm.
People's Choice. And I
Yeah.
won the People's Choice Award, uh, for Best Villainess. So, you know, I it's really strange, but more people recognize me from Knots Landing
Mm-hmm.
than they do the Mamas and the Papas. But of course, that was, I started Knots Landing in '86,
Mm-hmm.
and we hadn't been the Mamas and the Papas since uh, '67.
Yeah.
So,
20 years.
but China was already singing,
Mm-hmm.
and she and Carney and Wendy uh,
Formed Wilson
Wilson,
Phillips.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
put Wilson Phillips together, and they just shot right out of the box, with
Yeah.
Hold On.
Just like the Mamas and the Papas, that first record,
Yeah,
already a huge hit.
yeah, and they're great. They still do shows. They still
Mm-hmm.
do huge venues. They have an incredible fan base.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so It's it's I think it's time for them to be nominated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I would be down for that. I definitely
And so
grew up
does
on.
Brian, and so does Brian, by the way, Brian
Mhm.
Wilson.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure he does.
Yeah, we'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, me too. I just got one last question. We just put on display your uh, fun little artwork of the Mamas and the Papas that is now an NFT. So I want to hear sort of about the charity project that you're doing with the NFT, and then if you could just kind of describe, how you made the drawing. And I think it originated maybe as a Lou Adler sketch at one point.
Well, um, it was an ad in Billboard,
Okay.
and Lou Adler actually drew the doodle, and
Mhm.
we used it on it. We used it as a big, a full page ad in Billboard for something.
Hmm.
And so when I did the NFT, is that what they're called?
Yes, yes.
When I did the NFT, I put at the bottom, created by Lou Adler, drawn by Michelle Phillips.
Mhm.
But he was the one who originally uh, came up with it.
Mhm.
It's so cute.
Yeah, it's just this cute like caricature of the band. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah. Have you seen it? Or
I have. I went downstairs and looked at it when they installed it. It
yeah,
looks great.
yeah. You know, it's great, and I'm glad that people still appreciate it.
Mhm.
You know, and I asked Lou before I did it if I could use it,
Mhm.
and he said, "Of course you can, Michelle. You can use anything." I said, "Are you going to license it?" He said, "No, just use it." So,
Well, we already said he has enough money. So
what?
we already said that Lou has enough money.
Yeah.
So I'm glad he lets you have it.
Well, I gave the Painted Turtle, which is
Hmm.
a, a camp that he and his wife run
Yeah.
for children who are very sick,
Mhm.
and I gave them a big big check for as a donation,
Mhm. That's
and
great.
yeah, they were very happy. They were very happy to have a big donation to the Painted Turtle.
Mhm.
Does a lot of good.
And that's just a part of your legacy. Your charity work, your acting, your time in the Mamas and the Papas, your wonderful daughter. You have such a really wonderful legacy, and we're so honored to have had you join us today. As a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, to capture your story and to share it with all of our fans.
Well,
So I just
thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I always love being a part of anything at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've been there
Mhm.
a couple of times, and I just am very proud to be in it.
Well, we
Thank
are
you.
proud to have you in it. So thank you again so much. And everyone at home, have a wonderful day, and come and check out Michelle Phillips' great artwork here on site, and also come and check out uh, all of our great online assets like our Rock Hall EDU free platform. Speaking of supporting children, where you can find assets on the Mamas and Papas to use in your classroom, and other assets on the Laurel Canyon and the whole California scene. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Mandy Smith, and have a wonderful day, everyone.